Ruby knelt and traced the letters with her finger. No last name, no dates. Like they wanted to erase you completely. Jericho stood behind her, hat in his hands. Grave was already dug when I brought her here. Town council paid for it. Guilt money. Where's my father buried? Don't know. Left town when you were 2. Never came back. Ruby stood and wiped dirt from her knees. Show me where Dalton's buried. Jericho's face went pale. Ruby, show me. He led her to a patch of ground near the back fence. No headstone, no marker. Just weeds and hard-packed earth. This is where I put Dalton. Ruby stared at the unmarked grave. Put him? 3 days after your mama died. He was playing cards at Murphy's saloon. Drunk as usual. Bragging about teaching uppity women their place. You killed him, shot him in the back. Wasn't proud of it. But some men need killing. Ruby's legs went weak. You murdered him. I avenged her. There's a difference. Not in the eyes of the law. Jericho laughed bitterly. What law? Dalton was the law. Judge Henley was his cousin. Mayor Walsh owed him money. There wasn't going to be no justice through proper channels, so you took justice into your own hands. I did what needed doing. Ruby stared at this man who had carried 2 secrets for 20 years. Her mother's murder, Dalton's execution, both buried in the same dirt, separated by a few yards of weeds and silence. You've been living with this for decades, every damn day. Why tell me now? Jericho put his hat back on and looked toward town. Because some secrets get too heavy to carry alone. And because you deserve to know your mama was avenged. Ruby felt the weight of his confession settling on her shoulders like a yoke. Justice had been served, but it came with blood on its hands. Ruby kicked open the sheriff's office door so hard the glass rattled. Sheriff Webb looked up from his desk, coffee mug halfway to his lips. She slammed Dalton's tarnished badge on his desk. The metal rang like a death knell. Recognize this? Webb set down his mug. His face went white. Where'd you get that? From the man who cut my mother down from your uncle's rope. I don't know what you're talking about. Ruby pulled out her mother's letters and scattered them across his desk. These say different. 20 years of threats. 20 years of theft. 20 years of your family's corruption. You can't prove nothing. I got proof right here. Webb's eyes darted to the letters. That badge don't mean nothing now. Uncle Dalton's been dead for 20 years, murdered. Shot in the back by a man who couldn't stand watching justice rot. You're making wild accusations. Ruby pulled out her phone and hit record. Tell me about the cattle rustling operation. Tell me about the forged bills of sale. Webb stood up fast, his chair rolling back. Turn that damn thing off. Tell me about how your family's been covering for a killer for 2 decades. Turn it off. Ruby, tell me how you sleep at night knowing your uncle murdered a pregnant woman. Webb's hand moved to his holster. I said turn it off. Ruby held the phone steady. What you gonna do, Sheriff? Shoot me like your uncle did? Make me disappear too? Don't push me, girl. The whole town's gonna know. The state police are gonna know. Everyone's gonna know what kind of family you come from. Webb drew his gun. The barrel pointed straight at Ruby's chest. Give me that phone. Ruby didn't flinch. Too late. It's already uploading. Give me the damn phone. A shadow filled the doorway. Jericho stood there, silent as death, his hand resting on his own gun. Webb spun around, but Jericho's eyes never left his face. 2 of us now, Sheriff, Ruby said. How's that gonna look in your report? Webb kept his gun trained on Ruby, but his eyes were on Jericho. You're under arrest for the murder of Sheriff Dalton. Jericho stepped into the office, hands visible. I know. Don't resist, and maybe you'll live to see trial. I ain't resisting. Ruby held her phone higher. The whole world's watching now, Sheriff. Say it again. Tell them why you're arresting him. Turn off that camera. Tell them about your uncle's cattle theft. Tell them about my murdered mother. People were gathering outside the office windows. Ruby could see their faces pressed against the glass. Mabel, old Tom, Martha. Half the town seemed to be crowding around. This is police business, Webb shouted. Ruby opened the office door. Come on in, everyone. The sheriff's got something to say about his family. Stay back. Webb waved his gun wildly. We were all scared, Mabel said, stepping through the doorway. Scared for 20 years. Dalton ruled this town like a king, Tom added. Beat anyone who crossed him. He killed more than just Luna, Martha whispered. Remember Jenny Morrison? Found dead by the river? That was an accident, Webb said. Like hell it was, someone called from the crowd. Ruby kept her phone rolling. Tell them, Jericho. Tell them what you saw. Jericho's voice carried across the room. I saw Sheriff Dalton hang an innocent woman at dawn. I saw him murder Luna for standing up to his thievery. And you killed him for it, Webb snarled. I did, the crowd murmured. Ruby expected shock but saw only nods of understanding. Good, Tom said quietly. Should have done it sooner. This family's had blood on their hands too long, Mabel added. Webb's gun shook. You're all crazy. Uncle Dalton was a hero. Your uncle was a murderer, Ruby said. And you've been covering for him, the crowd pressed closer. Webb backed against his desk, surrounded by 20 years of suppressed truth. His authority was crumbling like a house built on sand. Justice, someone called from the back. Justice, others echoed. Webb looked at the faces surrounding him. No fear anymore, just anger that had been buried too long. The old oak tree stood silhouetted against the pink sky behind the courthouse. Ruby pulled the chainsaw from her truck bed. The engine roared to life, shattering the morning silence. You sure about this? Jericho asked. This tree's seen enough death. Ruby guided the blade into the trunk. Wood chips flew as she cut deep into the bark. 20 years of secrets fell with every bite of the chain. Jericho steadied the massive trunk as it began to lean. Timber. The oak crashed to earth with a sound like thunder. Birds scattered from the surrounding trees. The courthouse yard looked naked without its shadow. State police will be here in an hour, Ruby said, wiping sweat from her forehead. I know. You don't have to do this. No one's going to talk. I killed a man. I'm to pay for it. Ruby pulled a small sapling from her truck. The young tree's roots were wrapped in burlap, ready for planting. My mama would have wanted the truth told. Truth's all we got left now. Jericho knelt beside the old tree's stump and dug a small hole with his hands. He pulled a metal box from his coat and placed Ruby's mother's letters inside. Time capsule. So no one forgets. Ruby planted the sapling in the rich earth where the hanging tree once stood. The young oak looked fragile against the vast sky, but its roots would grow deep. What will you do when I'm gone? Jericho asked. Stay. Help other families who lost someone to men like Dalton. Make sure their stories get told. The sun crested the horizon, painting the courthouse walls gold. A new day was breaking over the town. The hanging tree was gone, but in its place stood something better. Something alive. Think it'll grow? Jericho asked. Ruby patted dirt around the sapling's base. It'll grow. The sheriff hung my mama at dawn, a silent cowboy. Cut the rope and put him in the ground. Ruby's knees hit the dusty attic floor as the wooden box split open. Letters were scattered like dead leaves across the warped planks. Her grandmother's house had been empty for 3 months, but the air still held the smell of lavender and secrets. What the hell? Ruby whispered, gathering the yellowed envelopes. Each one was addressed to Grandma Iris in her mother's careful handwriting. The postmarks went back 25 years. She opened the first letter with trembling fingers. Her mother's voice echoed from the page like a ghost speaking from the grave. Mama, Sheriff Dalton came by again today. He says I need to stop asking questions about the missing cattle. Says it ain't safe for a woman to be poking around where she don't belong. Ruby's heart hammered against her ribs. Missing cattle? What missing cattle? She tore open another letter. He threatened me today, Mama, right there in broad daylight outside the post office. Said accidents happen to nosy women all the time in this county. No, Ruby's voice cracked. No, this can't be right. The final letter was dated 3 days before her mother died. Ruby's hands shook so hard she could barely read the words. If something happens to me, tell Ruby the truth. The sheriff ain't the law here. He's the curse. He's been stealing from every ranch in the county for years, and I have proof. I'm scared, Mama, real scared. Ruby dropped the letter like it was on fire. Her mother hadn't died in a car accident. Everyone had lied to her. The whole damn town had lied to her for 20 years. They killed her. The words fell from her lips like stones into a well. That bastard sheriff killed my mama. The attic went silent, except for Ruby's ragged breathing and the sound of her world cracking apart. Ruby kicked open the diner door so hard it rattled the windows. Every head in the place turned toward her. The morning coffee crowd went silent. Mabel froze behind the counter with the coffee pot in her hand. "I want to talk about my mother." Ruby's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "I want to talk about what really happened to Luna 20 years ago." Old Tom shifted in his corner booth. "Ruby, honey, you need to calm down. Don't you honey me. Tell me about Sheriff Dalton." "Sheriff Dalton was a good man," Tom said. "A damn good man. Liar." Ruby slammed her hand on the nearest table. "He was a thief and a killer." Mabel set down the coffee pot. "Your mama was troubled, honey. Real troubled. Everyone knew it. Troubled how?" "She saw things that weren't there," said Martha from the back booth. "Always stirring up trouble where there wasn't none." Ruby's eyes burned. "What about the hanging tree behind the courthouse? You all remember that, don't you?" The diner went dead quiet. Tom's coffee cup rattled against his saucer. "Ain't no hanging tree," Tom muttered. "There's an old oak back there. Big thick branches. Perfect for a rope." "You're talking crazy," Martha whispered. "My mother wrote letters. She knew about the cattle rustling. She knew Dalton was dirty." One by one, people started sliding out of their booths. Tom threw money on his table and headed for the door. Martha followed. Within minutes, the diner was empty except for Ruby and Mabel. "They're all scared," Ruby said. Mabel wiped down the counter with shaking hands. "Some things are better left buried. Not this. Not my mother." Mabel glanced toward the windows, making sure no one was watching. Then she leaned close and whispered, "There was a cowboy. Never spoke a word. Just watched everything." "What cowboy?" "The one who cut her down." Ruby's truck kicked up a cloud of red dust as she pulled into the ranch yard. The place looked like it had been forgotten by time. Weathered fence posts leaned at broken angles. A single windmill creaked in the distance. Jericho stood on the porch, hat pulled low over his eyes. He watched her approach but didn't move, didn't speak. His face was carved from leather and silence. Ruby climbed out of her truck and walked toward him. "You're the cowboy Mabel told me about?" He nodded once. "You knew my mother, Luna?" Something shifted in his eyes. "Darker now, like storm clouds gathering. She was murdered 20 years ago." "By Sheriff Dalton." Jericho's jaw tightened. He turned and walked into the house. Ruby followed. The living room was bare except for a wooden table and 2 chairs. No pictures on the walls. "No memories allowed?" "I need to know what you saw," Ruby said. Jericho poured himself a glass of water from a pitcher. His hands were steady, but Ruby could see the tension in his shoulders. She didn't deserve to die. The words came out heavy and deliberate, like he'd been holding them for decades. Ruby's breath caught. "You were there. Sheriff Dalton was drunk on power. Your mama stood up to him. What did you see?" Jericho set down his glass. "Dawn, behind the courthouse. She was already hanging when I got there." Ruby's knees went weak. "You cut her down. Too late. Why didn't you tell anyone? Who was going to believe a drifter over a sheriff?" Ruby stared at this broken man who had carried her mother's death for 20 years. His guilt was written in every line on his face, in the emptiness of this house. In the silence, he wrapped around himself like armor. "You've been punishing yourself all this time." Jericho looked out the window at the endless horizon. "Some guilt doesn't wash off." Ruby's truck kicked up a cloud of red dust as she pulled into the ranch yard. The place looked like it had been forgotten by time. Weathered fence posts leaned at broken angles. A single windmill creaked in the distance. Jericho stood on the porch, hat pulled low over his eyes. He watched her approach but didn't move, didn't speak. His face was carved from leather and silence. Ruby climbed out of her truck and walked toward him. "You're the cowboy Mabel told me about?" He nodded once. "You knew my mother, Luna?" Something shifted in his eyes. "Darker now, like storm clouds gathering. She was murdered 20 years ago." "By Sheriff Dalton." Jericho's jaw tightened. He turned and walked into the house. Ruby followed. The living room was bare except for a wooden table and 2 chairs. No pictures on the walls. "No memories allowed?" "I need to know what you saw," Ruby said. Jericho poured himself a glass of water from a pitcher. His hands were steady, but Ruby could see the tension in his shoulders. She didn't deserve to die. The words came out heavy and deliberate, like he'd been holding them for decades. Ruby's breath caught. "You were there. Sheriff Dalton was drunk on power. Your mama stood up to him. What did you see?" Jericho set down his glass. "Dawn, behind the courthouse. She was already hanging when I got there. Ruby's knees went weak. You cut her down. Too late. Why didn't you tell anyone? Who was going to believe a drifter over a sheriff?" Ruby stared at this broken man who had carried her mother's death for 20 years. His guilt was written in every line on his face, in the emptiness of this house. In the silence, he wrapped around himself like armor. "You've been punishing yourself all this time." Jericho looked out the window at the endless horizon. Some guilt don't wash off. Jericho led Ruby across the yard to the old barn. The doors groaned as he pulled them open. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light that slanted through the gaps in the wood. He walked to a wooden chest in the corner and lifted the lid. Inside, coiled like a dead snake, was a length of rope. Ruby's stomach lurched. "That's it?" "That's it." Jericho lifted the rope with careful hands. The fibers were stained dark in places. Ruby didn't want to think about what those stains were. "Tell me what happened that morning." Jericho sat heavily on a hay bale. The rope lay across his knees like an accusation. "I was riding past the courthouse around dawn. Heard shouting. Dalton's voice, drunk and mean. What was he saying? Called her a troublemaker. Said she was disrupting the peace. Said she needed to learn her place." Ruby's hands clenched into fists. "She exposed his cattle theft. 300 head over 2 years. Your mama had proof. Bills of sale with forged signatures. She was going to take it to the state police. So he killed her. Wasn't no trial. Wasn't no judge. Just Dalton and his rage and this rope." Jericho's voice cracked. "I got there too late. She was already hanging. Already gone." Ruby wiped tears from her cheeks. "You cut her down. I held her body till sunrise. She wasn't breathing, but I couldn't leave her hanging like some scarecrow. No woman deserves that. Why didn't you go to the authorities?" "Dalton was the authority. His word against mine. Who do you think they'd believe?" Jericho stood and walked to the barn door. He stared out at the empty fields. "There's something else you need to know." Ruby's heart hammered. "What?" "Your mama was pregnant when she died." The words hit Ruby like a physical blow. "Pregnant?" "About 3 months along." "You would have had a brother or sister." Ruby doubled over, gasping for air. Dalton hadn't just murdered her mother. He'd murdered her unborn sibling, too. 2 lives, she whispered. "He took 2 lives. The cemetery sat on a hill overlooking the town. Weathered headstones leaned at crooked angles, like broken teeth." Ruby walked between the rows until she found it. A simple granite marker with 4 words carved deep: "Luna Beloved."